In Love and Chocolate by Talya Tate Boerner, Texas, USA. Uncle Rex and Aunt Frances lived in a single-wide at the edge of a cotton field on the home place. It was surrounded by a little stand of pine trees adjacent to Nana and Papa's house. Both of these particulars made the place extra special. Cottonwoods and pecans were plentiful in Mississippi County, but a grove of pine trees was a rare sight. I often wondered if my uncle planted those trees, or perhaps they grew from seeds Nana tossed from her back porch, much like Jack's enchanted beanstalk. I never thought to ask anyone. The inside of their home was as special as the outside. The air was altered, unruffled, protected. The tiny kitchen often held a freshly baked surprise, gooey brownies, chocolate chip cookies, or chocolate pie piled high with meringue. A massive console stereo spanned the entire living room wall, anchoring the trailer into the dirt, commanding attention without being obnoxious. Running my index finger softly over the polished wood surface from end to end, I always felt the urge to lower my head and make the sign of the cross, even though I was a Southern Baptist. A hidden altar on our farm, it lured us inside the calm inner sanctum, offering a brief respite from the mud pies and sweaty games of tag. It's where I first learned of Patsy Cline. Their amazing album collection was stacked neatly within the adjoining cabinet, arranged much like the cool display at my favorite record shop on Main Street. My sister and I spent hours thumbing through covers, studying the artists, memorizing lyrics, and we were allowed to play those albums unattended. Placing the needle of the record player arm just so, careful not to scratch the vinyl, we listened to Crazy over and over until the words burned into our brains like a beloved church hymn. Singing off-key and loudly, we perfected somersaults on the gold shag carpeting in front of the sofa. I was amazed at how such a small home could be spacious enough to accommodate tumbling. It was always spotless. Uncle Rex and Aunt Frances had no children to mess it up, other than my sister and me. As a kid, I wasn't aware of my uncle's little secret. Later, I learned Uncle Rex was an addict. He was madly hooked on Aunt Frances and chocolate. In that order. He was lost without Frances, adrift, disoriented, crazy, physically ill as if part of his being had dissolved. The part that kept him happy and focused and stable, the part that made him him, that held his chocolate addiction in balance. Thank God they were rarely apart, but sometimes it was unavoidable. One particular summer, Frances willingly agreed to donate a kidney to her ailing sister. To Uncle Rex's dismay, the transplant team wouldn't hear of performing the surgery from their single-wide, no matter how clean. A temporary separation was inevitable. It would only be a few days. Insurance saw to that, but even so, Uncle Rex was anxious. Sunday morning from the pulpit, scanning the faces of his devoted but sparse congregation, Pastor Brown inquired, "Are there any announcements? Any sick we need to add to the prayer list?" The overhead fans did little to stir the hot air inside the sanctuary. It was a steamy day. "Please keep praying for my brother-in-law. Doc says there's nothing more they can do. Hospice is scheduled to come in this week." The members were sympathetic, sadly nodding, a few friends murmuring with heads together, almost touching. The word hospice always brought a sense of finality. "Sister Sue wants us to pray for her brother-in-law," Pastor Brown repeated in his compassionate and commanding preacher voice, making sure everyone heard the plea. From near the back pew came a high-pitched appeal. "Rebecca had her baby, a little girl, but she's still in NICU over in Memphis. Been there 2 weeks now. Let's everyone pray for Sister Rebecca and her newborn daughter." Pastor Brown added these souls to the growing list, waving his hymnal for emphasis. "We need to pray for Rex Creasy. Sister Frances is fixing to give a kidney to her sister. You know he's lost without her. Couldn't even get him to come to church this morning," reported a concerned church member from the choir loft. Everyone glanced to the empty place he and Frances always sat each Sunday, their pew. The church family nodded in unison. Again, sad, low mumbling. Yes, everyone be sure to pray for Brother Creasy. He will need strength to make it through Sister Frances's procedure. And that's how it was. Everyone knew she would be fine, and everyone knew he would worry himself sick in her absence. By the end of evening prayer meeting, the good Southern church ladies had activated the casserole phone tree with the skill and precision of a military operation. A steady stream of china platters and covered crock pots began flowing onto the red formica kitchen table and spilling over to the countertop and stove. Food of wakes and funerals. Food to sustain and distract Uncle Rex. Food to make the church ladies feel useful. Chicken and dressing, piles of spaghetti with meatballs, macaroni and cheese, buttermilk biscuits with fresh pear preserves, a coconut pie, gallon jugs of sweet tea, and green Jell-O salad, the kind with pieces of pecans. And Sister Laverne made her famous homemade 5-layer triple chocolate cake. Uncle Rex never gave a thought to the other church lady food. Only Sister Laverne's famous homemade 5-layer triple chocolate cake held his attention. It was moist and creamy, with a drizzle of raspberry fudge sauce along the sides and a light-handed dusting of powdered sugar around the top. A tantalizing gastronomical work of art. As soon as Sister Laverne took her leave on his back stoop, saying, "Okay now, you call if you need anything at all," he slammed the door and hastily peeked inside the cake cover, drawing the chocolate aroma fully into his lungs. Before her dusty Chevrolet backed to the end of the gravel driveway, the kitchen was cloaked in the heavenly smell of warm milk chocolate and vanilla buttercream. And a hint of almond? His acute senses were awakened. Falling back into the chair, weakened, he allowed himself only a small sliver and a bit of icing. No need for a plate. The first taste was rich and velvety on his tongue. His pulse quickened. Unable to savor the slice, he quickly devoured it. Swathed in euphoria, the sensation lingered. With great difficulty, he replaced the lid to the Tupperware cake cover, snapping and sealing it shut, then relocated it high above the refrigerator by using a small step stool. Away, away. He knew to be careful with chocolate. A better plan would have been to remove it from the trailer altogether. Sleep wouldn't come. His heart raced as if beating outside his body, growing quicker and quicker and louder every instant. As he tossed, his legs became entangled and twisted in the bed sheets. The television offered no distraction. An old black and white movie combined with the chocolate in his mind only added to the maddening suspense. He played an old favorite album on his console, but the music was more noisy than soothing. The cake called. Weakened, he sat alone at the kitchen table, the trailer shrouded by pine trees throwing odd shadows along the walls. A thin, dim ray cast from a giant moon gleamed like the thread of a spider upon the triple chocolate dessert. Thrusting his finger deep into the frosting, he tasted it again. Luscious. Then he began to eat.
Yay!
He ate. The heady aroma consumed him. A groan of ecstasy escaped from somewhere within him. He ate the entire cake in one sitting. One decadent bite after another until the cake plate was empty but for a few moist crumbs. Like the eyes of a madman, his pale blues rolled back into his head. His heart raced. He collapsed into bed, intoxicated, crazed, drunk on chocolate. The clock struck 4. He awoke with excruciating chest pains, extreme pressure on his rib cage. His breathing was shallow, his arm numb. "I'm having a heart attack. True. Nervous, very, very nervous. I'm being punished for being so pathetic, for having no willpower. It is done." Sirens wailed, lights flashed. The faces of neighbors showed as lights swiftly passed across farmhouse windows, their dreams interrupted. Emergency technicians tried to calm him. His sugar levels were strangely and dangerously elevated. He was frenzied and agitated. Finally, he slept. Dreamless, black sleep. A bright light. The light drew him up and away from unconsciousness. He followed it. A sense of calm. I have died. Am I in heaven? Rex, can you hear me? He heard a distant yet familiar voice. God, is that you? God sounded oddly like Dr. Reggie. Slowly, through the lingering dark chocolate fog, his physician came into view. He flickered a penlight into his dilated pupils, back and forth, nearly blinding him. I've never had a patient overdose on chocolate cake. He chuckled heartily. Rex's head pounded as he remembered his embarrassing night of gluttony. Homemade, 5-layer, triple, chocolate cake. Yay! Where's Francis? He asked Dr. Reggie, his mouth dry and swollen, lips chapped. The machinery around him hummed and flashed periodically, the noises magnified in the sterile room. They'll be bringing her back from recovery soon. She did great. That'll be her bed over there. He pointed to the empty bed next to him only a few feet away. Sunlight streamed through the window. Dust motes danced, suspended midair. He smiled and dozed. He was back where he belonged.